everyone, it's Shay again, back again with another video, switching things up yet again. Today I want to talk about a local legend I grew up hearing as a teenager. This is the kind of story you hear while hanging out somewhere creepy, pretending you're totally not scared, even though you absolutely are. This one comes from my hometown at the old St. Thomas Church. And years later, I actually turned it into a Monster of the Week mystery called The Witch's Grave. But before it became a tabletop monster, it was a real place and a real person. The old St. Thomas Church is one of the oldest buildings in the area, surrounded by a pioneer cemetery filled with leaning stones and fading names. It looks like the exact kind of place a ghost story would grow. When I was in high school, everybody knew the rumor. There was a witch buried there, and her grave was cursed. When I first heard of the legend, I never had a name attached to the grave, but I now know that the grave belongs to Maria Baldwin. Her stone looks different from the others. It's darker, surrounded by 4 corner posts, and that difference is really what fueled the legend. But the story of how the legend actually started is pretty specific. In the 1970s, people noticed that Maria's gravestone had turned almost completely black. That was when rumors began. People started saying Maria must have been a witch. From there, the tales escalated over the years. Locals claimed the grave caught fire on Halloween, that anyone brave or dumb enough to step inside the 4 posts and touch the stones would be cursed, and that a black cat guarded the gravesite. Kids, of course, stared at each other. People snuck into the cemetery at night, and the story spread like wildfire. The truth is a little less supernatural and honestly way more human. The Railway City tourist website lists a lot of interesting and kooky tales from around town, particularly the Old St. Thomas Cemetery, and they explain the real reason why the gravesite turned black. The stone turned black because it was very porous. Years of acid rain and soot from the nearby railway soaked into it and stained it. No curses necessary, no flames, just chemistry and pollution. And just like many women who were accused of witchcraft, Maria was never a witch. Her life wasn't filled with magic or Satanism. It really was a life quite filled with tragedy. The roses carved in her headstone represent symbols of a life taken too soon. In 1863, Maria died from complications during childbirth at only 22 years old. Her baby sadly died 9 months later and is buried with her. So while the legend grew darker and more dramatic and sensationalized, the real story was already heartbreaking. I do understand why people kept telling the witch version of the story, though. There was a reason why when I was younger, I was so captivated by the story and it stuck with me over the years. And there's a reason why I turned the legend into my own Monster of the Week mystery. Cemeteries already make us deeply uncomfortable. It forces us to reconcile with our morality and the morality of our loved ones. And a blackened stone surrounded by posts looks really ominous and spooky. And folklore has a long history of turning women connected to tragedy into figures of fear. A legend created like that doesn't need truth to become a legend. They need repetition of being repeated and passed down from generation to generation, year after year. Years later, when I started writing games, the story resurfaced. Not the researched history, but the spooky rumor version my friends and I used to whisper to each other about. I took that urban legend version and turned it into a Monster of the Week mystery, The Witch's Grave. In the game, the witch actually is supernatural, but not while she was living. She was never a witch. Instead, the unwarranted accusations, the grief, the misunderstanding, and the dangerous way folklore often paints powerful women has twisted her in death to be the very thing that the townsfolk has created. It let me explore how communities project fear onto people they don't understand and the consequences that can come from that fear. But I still want to be clear that the game is fiction, despite the nuances and the point I'm trying to tell. And Maria Baldwin was a real person, and she deserved better than to be remembered as a curse or a witch. I still love spooky stories. I still love folklore. I still love this spooky story. And honestly, I still get a chill walking through that cemetery. But walking through those posts, I didn't get cursed. I didn't have my tires go out on the way home. I didn't have bad luck for years later following me around. The legend was just that, a legend. But this legend reminds me that behind every ghost story is a real human life. And sometimes the truth hurts more than the myth. Teenaged me was absolutely enthralled by the idea of this grave being haunted by a witch. Adult me knows the history and the context, and somehow that feels even more haunting. Thanks for watching. If you had your own local legend growing up, tell me about it in the comments. I love hearing these stories. If you want to check out The Witch's Grave, the link will be below. Just remember, it's a fantasy version of a story that's already meaningful on its own. And if you want to check out more of the stories that are in the cemetery, check out the tourism website. I might do more videos on some local legends of like some of the areas I grew up in or nearby places. And I think a lot of these places can really give me or you inspiration into some of the stories we're telling ourselves, especially in tabletop role-playing games. Bye-bye.